These are my note cards. This is my audience.
Hello, I'm Tamia, and I'm 20 years old.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm 21.
I'm Bethany. I'm 22.
I'm Katie. I'm 21.
I'm Joshua, and I'm 22.
I'm Whitney, and I'm 21.
And my visual aid is going to be a PowerPoint, so it will, maybe I should put it over there, put the table back someplace. Actually, see, sorry. There we go, I don't know. I'll send it to her. Okay. Raise your hand if you have a social media account. Raise your hand if you use social media daily. Raise your hand if you have 3 or more social media accounts. And then raise your hand if you spend 3 or more hours on social media daily. So nobody raised their hand. You guys kind of did, but actually most of you probably do. So as adults, we use our social media to network with old friends and even sometimes for work. It's become a norm in our society, and it's very ingrained in how we live our everyday lives. But unfortunately for teens and children who are still developing, it can somehow create false perceptions of what the world is really like and then inhibit them developmentally. So I'm here to talk to you guys today about how social media can have negative consequences and effects on teens and children as they are growing up and developing. Anna Homelund describes, in her book, it's called Social Media Wellness, she describes our culture as a culture of comparison in which we experience everything twice, once online and once in real life. And obviously those two things don't always mesh well together. So teens, like I said, who are still developing, can sometimes get false perceptions of what the real world is like based on what they are experiencing online. So as a college student, obviously, we are all college students here, and we all use social media a lot, and we can see the immense benefits of networking that we get from it. But for teens, they may not get those same benefits because they're not in the workforce yet or anything like that, and they're just using it mostly for socialization. So in this speech, I will persuade you that restrictions need to be placed on social media use for teens because it increases depression and anxiety in teens, it causes sleep deprivation and obesity, and it also can encourage risky behaviors. By the end, I hope that you will encourage adults in your life that have teenage children or even your younger siblings that there need to be restrictions placed on the amount of social media that they use. So, now that I've talked to you a little bit about social media, I'm going to talk to you a little about social media and mental health. So you can see here in this little chart here that it's like positive impacts on mental health are like creativity, connectivity, and social marketing, and then some negative effects are depression, insomnia, and then constant profile updating. So Leah Schaefer is a head researcher at Harvard Grad School, and she says that teens have developmental stressors that they face across the board universally, and as social media is introduced, those stressors are increased. So those stressors include FOMO, seeing people post about things that they're not invited to, feeling pressure to post positive images of themselves, pressure to get likes and comments, and then also seeing events that you cannot control or that you're not a part of. So these increase stress in teens and often lead to anxiety and depression. And they also increase loneliness in teens. Even though they feel more connected with others, they spend more time isolated, focusing on improving their social media presence. So then in that fact, they're not interacting with people like they should. And then in addition to those depression and anxiety, problematic internet use is also a mental health issue that comes from chronic internet and social media use. Video gamers often suffer from this problematic internet use, and 4 to 8% of children in America have a hard time limiting their own social media use, and 10% of children ages 8 to 18 are at risk for problematic internet use and chronic gaming disorders. So it's very much a problem. So now that I've talked about some of the mental health problems that that are due to social media use. I would talk about some of the physical health problems, which you guys are probably familiar with, that obviously chronic use of social media and technology can lead to obesity. So this chart is actually showing, this is a phys ed chart that they use for like kids K through 12, that they're trying to use social media to help encourage physical activity. So at the lowest level, it's just like passive social media use, like not using social media at all. The second level is like teacher-initiated social media use. So like teachers will use like stepping apps and things to encourage their students to get a certain amount of steps through the day and become active. And then at the top left tier, it's like even more use of those apps and encouraging like exercising like apps and things in like the phys ed classroom. So trying to kind of incorporate those two worlds. But basically excessive screen use can lead to obesity. 32% of children ages 2 to 19 are overweight in America, and 70% of that is genetic, but 20% of it is based on socio and environmental factors, which in a large part is social media. And then insomnia and sleep deprivation comes from constant blue light and screen use for teens, especially in the nighttime, and can have negative impacts on their schoolwork over time. So. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about risky behaviors along with social media use. So Dana Boyd is a principal researcher at Microsoft Research, and she writes, "It's complicated the lives of social network teens." And she talks about how cyberbullying is rampant, which I'm sure you guys have probably heard about it in the news in various cases, and how teens use social media to expose their peers and often threaten them. It's becoming a huge problem, and it's kind of hard to identify and pinpoint as bullying. But one positive thing that's come out of this is that a lot of teachers, parents, and even other students are able to use social media to become more aware and even allow for consequences and evidence to be shown for students to have consequences for their cyberbullying. So that's one positive thing. Another thing that Boyd mentions in her anecdotes in her novel is that social media use can open up for children to be exposed to more predators. Obviously, kids create false accounts with false ages, and they are exposed to adults and strangers that they don't know. They also tend to hide these accounts from their parents, which can lead them to being put in risky situations. One last thing that I have listed here is online acceptance, which kind of has two ends of the spectrum. So online acceptance is the idea that students or children that are not accepted basically in the real world or don't feel like they fit in anywhere can often find acceptance in groups online. We can see the positive and negative effects of this as Caroline Knorr cites in she's a Common Sense Media parent editor. She talks about how there was a Minecraft group where a kid was saying that he wanted to commit suicide, and the kids in his group were able to talk him out of it and even get in contact with his parents, all from being online. Now, we see that kind of like mob influence can have positive effects on students, but then also we can also see, because that teens are very easily influenced, it can be influenced to do negative things. It could have just as easily gone the opposite way. So yeah, children and teens need to have restrictions on social media, and so I'm going to give you guys some ways that we can help make changes to ensure that these effects don't continue to run rampant. So the American Academy of Pediatrics says that the best way to approach restricting social media is to implement curfews or family plans for social media use. In other words, parents should model for their children what's appropriate social media use. Children should have curfews, and they should be able to earn screen time in a sense that if you finish all of your homework, then you can be on your phone for an hour, or if you finish all of your chores, you can be on your phone for this amount of time. That will restrict their amount of screen time and also teach them patience, because teens and children in today's society are unable to really build patience because of instant gratification, so it's kind of a two-folded thing. And then these few changes can have a significant impact on what kind of the teens and children, will become. It's our responsibility as adults to make sure that our children are protected, and the best way to start is to present ourselves as good role models. So just think a little bit more about how you use your social media, and if you are one of those people that spends more than 3 hours, maybe spend a little less time and go outside and run around for a little bit, and that'll also encourage the kids in your life to try to emulate you.